What hidden truths lie behind the legacy of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor? A name enveloped in mystery and admiration. A sovereign who commanded the global stage, his rule signified an era of remarkable transformation. From the flourishing Renaissance to the seismic shifts of the Reformation, Charles V steered a world on the brink of change. His dominion, a mosaic of varied lands and cultures, spanned continents. Get ready to journey through a fascinating historical narrative, one that will reshape your understanding and spark your curiosity. History is a complex tapestry, intricately woven from myriad threads. Some threads gleam brightly, highlighted by the passage of time. Others remain hidden in shadows, their true essence masked by rumor, speculation, and intentional concealment. The narrative of Charles V is no exception. His rule, a significant era in European history, has been examined and discussed for generations. Join us as we delve into this fascinating search for truth, a journey that promises to be both enlightening and intriguing. On February 24, 1500, in the Flemish city of Ghent, a child with a remarkable destiny was born. Named Charles, he was the offspring of Philip the Handsome, Duke of Burgundy, and Joanna of Castile. Through his father, he gained the affluent and thriving Burgundian territories, yet it was his mother's heritage that truly shaped Charles's future. Joanna, his mother, was the daughter of King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabella I of Castile. Few could have predicted that this newborn would rise to become one of history's most influential rulers. Charles's early years were anything but typical. Raised in the lavish courts of Flanders, he was immersed in a diverse mix of languages, traditions, and political maneuvering. His education was overseen by a group of distinguished scholars and diplomats. He became proficient in several languages, including French, Flemish, Spanish, and some German. Yet Charles's legacy was more than just lands and riches. Even as a young man, Charles recognized that his inheritance came with great power and equally great responsibility. Destiny had different plans, as a tragedy befell Charles at the tender age of 6. His father, Philip the Handsome, passed away unexpectedly, creating a significant void in the young prince's life. As a mere child, Charles assumed the title of Duke of Burgundy. His aunt, Margaret of Austria, took on the role of his regent, steering his initial journey towards leadership. Under Margaret's guidance, Charles was swiftly educated in the art of governance. These formative experiences profoundly influenced the young Duke, shaping his perspective and instilling a profound sense of duty towards his subjects. During his youth, Charles became increasingly aware of the difficulties that awaited him. The French, eager to regain the Burgundian territories, saw a chance in the young Duke's perceived weakness. Charles, with the guidance of his advisors, had to navigate carefully, balancing his ambition to assert his rule with the necessity to avoid direct conflict with his formidable neighbour. At the same time, reports from Spain brought new worries. Approaching adulthood, Charles found himself divided between his duties in Burgundy and the escalating issues in his Spanish inheritance. The situation in Spain was becoming increasingly alarming. Queen Joanna's mental health had declined so severely that regency was essential for the realm's stability, beyond mere political strategy. Charles, still navigating the intricacies of his Burgundian legacy, was called to Spain to assume his rightful position. When he arrived in 1517, the atmosphere was a blend of hope and anxiety. Charles exhibited a quiet resolve and a sharp awareness of the complex political environment. He proceeded with caution, methodically consolidating his authority while honoring the traditions and sensibilities of his Spanish subjects. As Charles navigated the complexities of his Spanish inheritance, significant events across Europe began to influence his future. In 1519, his paternal grandfather, Maximilian I, Holy Roman Emperor, died, leaving the imperial seat unoccupied. Charles, being the eldest grandson of Maximilian, emerged as a prime candidate for the imperial crown. His Habsburg heritage, extensive inheritance, and his rising reputation as a strategic and competent leader made him a strong contender. Nevertheless, his bid for the throne faced significant resistance. The future of Europe was at a critical juncture, with the decision lying in the hands of a select few influential men. Against all odds, Charles triumphed in the electoral contest, ascending to power at the tender age of 19, becoming the supreme ruler of Christendom. He was officially crowned as Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor. Yet his victory was shadowed by the formidable challenges that awaited him. The Holy Roman Empire he now governed was on the verge of religious and political turmoil. As a staunch Catholic, Charles found himself in the eye of this escalating storm, charged with the dual task of defending his faith and maintaining the unity of his empire. As Charles contended with the spread of Protestantism within his realm, a formidable adversary arose from the east. The Ottoman Empire, led by the ambitious Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, was rapidly advancing westward. For Charles, the Ottoman advance posed more than just a military threat. It represented a profound cultural confrontation. He invested heavily in strengthening the defences of his eastern territories and secured alliances with Venice and the Papal States. The confrontation between Charles V and Suleiman the Magnificent would be remembered through the ages. Charles V's reign was a delicate balancing act, managing responsibilities that stretched across continents and cultures. His vast empire was more a collection of territories than a unified state. Each kingdom under his rule had its own distinct traditions, languages, and legal systems. Despite his great authority, Charles was not an absolute ruler. He depended on a network of advisors, viceroys, and regents to manage his widespread domains. The enormity of his empire, the challenge of governing such a diverse and extensive realm, took a significant toll on Charles, both physically and emotionally. As Charles V steered through the complex landscape of European politics and conflict, a murmur campaign emerged, questioning the core of his heritage. This wasn't the typical rumours of illegitimacy or hidden parentage that plagued royal courts. This was a claim far more daring. The rumour mill buzzed, alleging that Charles V had African ancestry, dubbing him, in their words, the Negro Emperor. Charles's adversaries capitalized on this rumor, manipulating it to their benefit. They highlighted his physical traits, his allegedly darker complexion compared to his fair-skinned Habsburg kin, as evidence of this concealed heritage. Some took a more malicious approach, proposing that this supposed African ancestry explained what they saw as Charles's despotic behavior. Section 2. Portraits and Propaganda, Misinterpreting the Visual Record. The claims about Charles V's African heritage are primarily based on interpretations of his portraits. Some images of the emperor, especially those created later in his life, depict him with a darker skin tone compared to his Habsburg predecessors. Relying on artistic depictions alone, particularly from a time when artists often used creative freedom and idealized portrayals, can lead to misconceptions about historical evidence. Portraits were frequently commissioned to convey an image of power, piety, or authority, rather than to provide an accurate representation of an individual. Additionally, the pigments used by 16th century artists were not always stable. Exposure to light and air could cause certain colors to darken over time. What might seem like a deep tan or darker skin tone in an old portrait could simply be due to aging pigments, not the subject's actual complexion. Furthermore, the concept of race and categorizing people based on skin color was much more fluid and less rigidly defined in the 16th century than it is today. While differences in skin tone were noted, they were not necessarily seen as defining traits that determined one's lineage or identity. Section 3. The Habsburg complexion debunking a pseudoscientific claim. Proponents of the myth regarding Charles V's African ancestry often cited the distinctive Habsburg jaw, a notable feature that became synonymous with the Habsburg lineage. They claimed this physical trait, frequently seen with a fuller lower lip, indicated African heritage within the family, a misunderstanding of both genetic science and historical facts. The Habsburg jaw, contrary to being a marker of African descent, resulted from extensive inbreeding within the Habsburg family. This practice, prevalent among European royalty to maintain power and wealth within the family, caused a concentration of specific genes, both advantageous and harmful. The pronounced lower jaw was one such inherited trait, passed down through successive generations of Habsburg rulers. Attributing this physical feature to African ancestry, while disregarding the well-documented history of inbreeding within the dynasty, is to engage in selective interpretation and to promote a racially charged narrative that lacks any scientific basis. Section 4. The power of narrative. Why does this myth persist? Despite the absence of solid historical proof, the myth of Charles V's African lineage endures even today. What keeps this story, this blend of rumour and conjecture, alive in certain circles? The answer lies in the compelling nature of narratives, the human inclination to embrace stories that align with pre-existing beliefs or that provide a more sensational, albeit less accurate, version of history. For some, the notion of a powerful European ruler with African roots is intriguing, a way to reframe history to be more inclusive or to challenge conventional accounts of European supremacy. Others may hold on to this myth to undermine Charles V and his legacy. By attributing his deeds, both good and bad, to his alleged African heritage, they aim to perpetuate damaging stereotypes and to belittle his achievements. The reality, as is often the case, is far more intricate and layered than any myth can convey. Charles V was a man of his era, influenced by the political, religious and social dynamics of 16th century Europe. To truly grasp his reign, his successes and his shortcomings, we must approach the historical record with honesty and critical thinking, distinguishing fact from fiction and resisting the temptation of narratives that distort history to serve specific agendas. Reframing history. The urge to revisit historical narratives is not inherently flawed. History is a continuous dialogue shaped by new discoveries and shifting viewpoints. Revising history can deepen our comprehension, highlighting overlooked perspectives. Yet it can also misrepresent the past when influenced by specific motives. The assertion of Charles V's African heritage lacks substantial historical evidence. It applies a modern perspective to historical events, reinforcing biases instead of addressing complexities. The urge to identify historical figures with specific cultures or ethnicities is understandable, especially in a world dealing with the impacts of colonialism, racism, and cultural erasure. Representation is significant, and seeing one's identity mirrored in history can be a validating and empowering experience. However, it is essential to differentiate between genuine efforts to recognize and honor the contributions of marginalized groups throughout history, and attempts to alter history to suit modern perspectives, even if well-meaning. Assigning African ancestry to Charles V, based purely on conjecture and misinterpretations of his appearance, risks crossing into cultural appropriation. It undermines the authentic and documented histories of Africans in Europe, both in the 16th century and later, by simplifying their experiences into an inaccurate narrative. Additionally, It reinforces the damaging idea that physical traits are reliable indicators of one's heritage or cultural identity. Race, as we understand it today, is a social construct, not a biological fact. To base historical assertions on superficial interpretations of physical appearance is to promote a simplistic and ultimately misleading view of both history and human diversity. To delve into Charles V's heritage, we must examine historical records and his own words. There's no proof that Charles V ever acknowledged the Negro Emperor legend. He consistently identified as a member of the Habsburg dynasty, a European sovereign. His writings reflect a strong sense of pride in his Habsburg heritage. His decisions and policies were in line with his European Christian identity. The historical evidence does not support claims of African ancestry for Charles V. In a time overflowing with information, where historical accounts vie with conspiracy theories and social media magnifies both truth and falsehood with equal intensity, the skill to critically evaluate sources is more vital than ever. The narrative of Charles V and the legend of his African lineage serves as a warning, highlighting the need for thorough historical scrutiny. By treating history with a questioning mind and seeking proof, we ensure our knowledge is based on reality, not myths. Only then can we genuinely learn from history and tackle the issues of today and tomorrow. The lasting impact of Charles V, a figure full of paradoxes. Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, King of Spain, Archduke of Austria, wielded immense power and influence. His rule witnessed religious conflicts, the rise of Protestantism and Ottoman advances. He governed during a transformative period, shaping the course of European history. Despite his power, Charles V was a complex and contradictory figure, a devout Catholic overseeing a divided empire, a Habsburg ruler with a fragmented dominion, privileged by birth, yet burdened by the weight of leadership. Legends often obscure the true nature of his intricate identity. To understand him, we must engage with the historical record sincerely. The quest for historical accuracy is a collaborative effort, extending beyond the confines of libraries and academic institutions. It involves a collective commitment to uncovering the complexities of the past and challenging oversimplified narratives that obscure the truth. In today's era of information saturation and widespread misinformation, it is crucial to approach historical assertions with critical thinking, seeking evidence, and fostering respectful dialogue. The myth of Charles V's African ancestry endures because it provides a captivating story, one that aligns with certain modern perspectives or reinforces pre-existing beliefs. Yet, as we have demonstrated, this story falls apart under examination, lacking any substantial historical proof. Simply dismissing these myths as harmless is insufficient. We must critically engage with them, highlighting their logical flaws, the absence of supporting evidence, and the potential damage they can cause by reinforcing stereotypes and distorting historical understanding. The authentic tale of Charles V, rooted in historical facts, is more captivating than any legend. It is a narrative of ambition, victories, and setbacks, of a man facing enormous challenges. Charles V's legacy defies simplistic explanations. He embodied contradictions, showing both cruelty and kindness, a devout Catholic who waged war to suppress religious dissent. To grasp Charles V's story, we must appreciate the subtleties of history. We need to understand historical figures within the framework of their own era. The pursuit of historical truth involves comprehending the past in all its intricacy. Unveiling the myths and speculations about Charles V reveals a figure of greater depth and intrigue. We encounter a ruler burdened by a vast inheritance, striving to keep a divided empire together while facing external adversaries and internal conflicts. His narrative, free from the fabricated African ancestry, remains filled with ambition, intrigue, and significant moments in European history. By discarding the myth, we uncover the true essence of Charles V, a multifaceted and flawed leader whose decisions, both celebrated and condemned, still echo through time. This is the legacy we must confront, one based on reality, not fiction. By embracing the complexities of history, recognizing both its victories and its failures, we can gain a deeper understanding of the past and apply its lessons to the present and future. If you enjoyed uncovering the untold stories of history, don't forget to subscribe, like and share this video. Stay tuned for more fascinating historical revelations.